Thank you. Hello, good morning, all. So glad you're here. I'm Deb Meyhoff. I'm with Communitas. I'm a facilitator with DLCD for the Needs and Housing Production TAC, fondly referred to as the NAP TAC. We're glad you're here. We're referring to this as meeting number 2 because you all will likely remember that we had a orientation with all the TACs in December. So the numbering system has been confusing for all of us, but it'll be no problem going forward. And as you know, we have a pretty rapid schedule ahead of us, meeting weekly for the next few weeks. So I'm going to spend just a couple before we get to the agenda and really dive in. I'm going to just do a little bit of overview recap to make sure we're all on the same page, and just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to get down to it. A couple of things, and I'll mention this again later. We really designed these technical advisory committee meetings to be somewhat informal. I realize they're pretty formal. I mean, they're a large group. We'll do our best. They're virtual meetings. But that means we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time going over materials that you've been sent ahead of time. We'll do that as much as you need to or enough to sort of set the context, and really hoping to have discussion with one another, idea generation, sort of exploration of ideas. So just a reminder, the charge of the NAP TAC is one of 3 TACs. The other 2 are housing accountability and capacity and urbanization. But the housing needs and production is looking to deep dive into the technical and implementation issues and consequences that may result from recommended rules. That's for all the TACs. And taking policy direction from, of course, LCDC, the RAC, and department staff as they work to operationalize the legislation into rule and guidance. And the department may ask other technical advisors and other experts to weigh in on these topics. So it's we're relying heavily on the TACs, but it's not the only source of where these discussions are happening. And we will be tackling primarily 2 major policy issues, or sort of rulemaking needs around this. Needed housing and Goal 10. We're going to dig into that today, as well as the fair housing and affirmatively furthering fair housing direction from the legislature and sort of how that blends in with Goal 10. And then, of course, the housing production strategy, rules around that exist, rules that will be needed to further the advancement of greater diversity of housing choices with flexibility in location and characteristics, and fair and equitable housing. The schedule, I believe you all are well aware, is rapid. There needs to be draft rule by the end of the year, by January 1st. And there needs to be, or LCDC needs to have adopted it actually by January 1st of 2025. That sort of means that we need to get a draft rule going starting in July. So the staff will be doing these TAC meetings in earnest, March, April, May, taking June to write some draft rules, and then there'll be a process of working through those. Those will be drafts, so they won't be final for quite a while, but there'll be a process to review those, and you all will be integral to that as well. And that is for the needs and housing production rules, as well as the housing accountability rules. If you may recall, the capacity and urbanization rules have another year beyond this. And let me see if there's anything else relevant to that. I think that's pretty good. If anyone has lost track of their charge of the TAC or any of the orientation materials, let us know. We'll get you a link to that information if you need to check back in on what this TAC is supposed to be doing. So just a couple of general housekeeping pieces, and then we'll get into the fun parts. We do have technical support here today. That's Ingrid Cadell. You've heard from her before. The chat will be off except for your ability to chat with Ingrid to get some technical support. So if you're having trouble within the meeting, let us know. We're keeping the chat off so we can keep the discussion in the room and verbal, but we will have an opportunity for you to weigh in with any additional comments or thoughts that you aren't able to verbalize at the meeting after the meetings. And so we'll line you out on that. We're still working out the exact method for that, but after this meeting, we'll get you a way to follow up on that. We will be doing note-taking during the meeting. So sort of, imagine you're in a room and there's a big flip chart and somebody has a marker in their hand. In this meeting, Celestina will be helping with that. And we'll do a share screen so you can sort of track along with the comments and the notes. And then if that becomes too distracting, we can turn that off as well. And then one important thing, we have a distinguished and pretty great guest TAC member and Commissioner Alan Lazo, who's here. Alan is serving. Hi, Alan. Good morning. I just want to. We've talked about sort of the role of having a commissioner here and how that can be awkward maybe sometimes, but we're hoping it's not, because again, these are supposed to be sort of open dialogue. But Alan is here not just as a commissioner, he's here as a commissioner to observe and make sure he's getting information back and forth to the commission and being a good liaison that way. But he's also here because he has decades of experience in fair housing. And we have a really fantastic opportunity to have him help us enrich this rulemaking and make sure we're building fair housing in a way into the process and the rules that will advance this. So we will be leaning on him for that expertise, that subject matter expertise. And you'll meet our other subject matter expert here in a second, Andre Tremolay. And then, so that's that. If anyone has questions or thoughts as we move along on sort of, the role of the commissioner here, and also as Alan, so he's wearing two hats, let me know or reach out to me and I'm happy to talk about it and sort our way through that. And then just lastly, I mentioned, our hope for these meetings is to be semi-informal. I mean, these are serious proceedings, but I'm also hoping we can have open dialogue. And that's my role here, and make sure that we're welcoming one another's perspectives and ideas, and just acknowledge some of these conversations are going to be hard. We're not going to agree on everything. And that's okay. We're prepared for that, but we just need to make sure that we're opening the door for everyone to weigh in, so we have a really good idea about what's on your mind, which directions you think things need to go, and then staff and the commission are going to sort through that and find the best path forward. I suspect there'll be a lot of areas of consensus. But that's not our role here. Our role is really to make sure all the ideas are on the table and we're getting a rich rulemaking process. So please help me make sure everyone in the room has a chance to speak. I'll be tracking on that. And a really important part of this group is there are experts who are deeply involved in Goal 10, needed housing, all the ways that gets operationalized at the city level. Or the local government level. And then there are also folks in the room who are on the outcome side of things. They're develop housing. They are very integral and involved in policy setting for fair housing. And so sometimes you all have both expertises in one. And sometimes you're more experienced in one than the other. We acknowledge that, but we're trying to set up these discussions so that everyone can participate. If you don't know the details of needed housing, that's okay. You do know the details of fair and equitable housing and vice versa. And so again, just please help make sure your colleagues have space to speak here. And then we are going to try to use the raise hand function. If you can't hit the button or find the button, just literally wave your hand. I'll find you. And then I'll touch on some ground rules before we get the discussion going. One more really important thing. We are setting these up intending that we'll get you materials 5-ish days ahead of time. I don't know that it's always going to be a full week ahead, but a good number of days ahead of time. We're hoping you are able to review, or we're expecting you're able to review and come prepared so we don't have to go through all those materials in these meetings. And what that does is allows us to have the majority of this time available for discussion. Our aim is to have at least an hour of discussion time. It'll be a little less today because we have some of these ground rules and not just ground rules, but housekeeping items and some space for introductions. So it's going to be a little bit less today, but bear with us. That's our aim, is to try to get there. Any questions before we launch into the agenda?
Just since I know the chat's going to the hosts, if we have like a link to a lit review or like a study or something like that that we want to share, should we just send that to the host to send to everybody in the meeting?
Good question. Mari or Ingrid, do you have thoughts on that? I don't think we've worked that out yet, Brock.
I think that's something just to be emailed through, Brock.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'm sure we'll discover little tidbits like that we haven't quite sorted out. So everyone should have the agenda. We're happy to post it in the chat if it's not already there, a link to the agenda if you need a reminder. And so I'm not going to go over that, but I will just mention every meeting agenda, we have meeting objectives, primary discussion objectives, and the racial equity framework questions that are applicable to our discussion. We'll talk about that some more in a minute. And then today we are going to be launching into the initial brainstorming for needed housing, and we'll get into the details of that. But the statute says needed housing needs to address type, characteristic, and location. We're going to talk about what that could mean or should mean. And that's the bulk of our agenda. We'll do a little check-in at the end and give you a heads up on what's coming next. So I think that's going to be it for welcome and agenda overview. I'm already a little bit late, but I think we're going to be fine. I'm going to hand it over to the DLCD team and our consultant team to do some introductions, and then we'll go to the TAC. Mari, start with you, please.
Thank you, Deb. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Mari Valencia Aguilar. Please call me Mari. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm a housing planner with the department. First, I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your commitment in serving in the Needs and Production Technical Advisory Committee as part of the owner rulemaking process. I have zero doubts that collectively this group will meet the charge assigned to our TAC. There's a wealth of expertise and knowledge here, so I'm really excited to have you all. So thank you again for holding space with us today and then throughout this process. I am going to kick it over to my colleague Celestina, but Deb, I also want to kind of flag OHCS staff in the room too, if we can make sure we get them looped in. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the reminder. Yep.
Thanks so much, Mari. Hello, everybody. Celestina Teva, she and they pronouns. As Mari just introduced, will be working collaboratively with Mari on supporting you all and receiving all of the wisdom that is on the screen right now in the room as we embark on writing these rules. I'm excited to be here, and I'm just excited to dig in. So additionally, I will note that I'll be note taking today, as Deb said, a little bit later in the meeting when we get into discussion. And I encourage you all to let me know if the note that I've taken doesn't seem to reflect your comment, or if you feel like I've mischaracterized something, because I know there's a lot of power in that translation. So that's all for today. Without further ado, back to you, Deb, and whoever might be next.
Great. Thank you. Ethan, are you able to introduce yourself? Oh, great.
I am, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan Stuckmeyer. I'm the manager of the housing division at DLCD. Just very, very happy to be here today and see this process kind of kicking off. So I will be listening in the background. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you. And Thea?
Hi all, thank you, Deb. I'm Thea Croman, she, her pronouns. I'm a housing policy analyst with DLCD and serving as lead for the housing accountability TAC, but here to provide some overlap and make sure that we are not siloing the work of the TACs, but primarily just listening in the background for now. Thanks.
Glad you're here. Thank you. And I see Mitch Hanush from OHCS. Hi, Mitch.
Hi, Deb, and thanks, Molly, for calling me out. Hi, everyone. Mitch Hanush. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the senior policy analyst for the Affordable Rental Housing Division at Oregon Housing Community Services. We are involved with this work as well, and I'm mostly here to support Molly and the DLCD team and make sure we're drawing connections between kind of the equity indicator work that OHCS is going to be undertaking moving forward as well. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much for being here. Before I'm going to go to Andre next, unless there's someone else from DLCD or OHCS that I've missed. Okay, great. Go ahead, Andre.
Hi, I'm Andre Tremolay, Common Works Consulting. My area of expertise and what I can add has to do with the intersection of fair housing and Goal 10. And I'm here to listen to what you have to say. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this team.
Great, welcome. Thank you, Andre. And then I'm going to shift us into TAC members. If you could, I'm going to start with you, Alan Lazo, too, just so you know, if you could give your name, any organization that you're affiliated with regard to this rulemaking and other involvement in the ONA process. I know some of you are on the RAC and other TACs. It'd be great if you'd just let us know what those are or any other related rulemaking you'd like to bring in. So Alan Lazo, please.
Thanks, Deb, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alan Lazo. I use he, him pronouns. Most of you probably know me. I'm the recently retired executive director of the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and I'm currently a commissioner with the Land Conservation and Development Commission. And so as Deb indicated early on, I play several roles in these spaces. I'm also a member of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. I'm the LCDC liaison to the RAC also. And so in the role as a liaison from LCDC, I really am here to make sure that I am understanding and bringing back to my colleagues the perspectives that come out of this TAC and the RAC in full. And then sort of at the other end of the spectrum, and the middle part of that spectrum is that subject matter expertise around fair housing. And then the other end of that spectrum is really me advocating in the fair housing movement. And so you'll see me moving along that spectrum as we work through this TAC, and I'll try to indicate from which role I'm speaking as I move through with my comments. And very often in this space, it will be in that advocacy or subject matter expertise role, and really operating more as a commissioner and really gathering information and perspectives from here. So glad to be here with you all.
Thank you so much and welcome. And I am embarrassed. I missed one of the most integral people on our team at DLCD, which is Ingrid Cadell. Ingrid, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
That's probably a bit much. Thank you. Yes, hi everyone. Ingrid Cordell. I'm the advisory committee coordinator here for DLCD. Happy to be here to help with anything I can help you with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to move. It's probably going to go in alphabetical order because that's the easiest way for me to keep track here. So that means Alan De La Torre. I think I have your name pronounced right. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Deb, and hi all. So Alan De La Torre, I am currently faculty at Portland State in the College of Urban and Public Affairs. I am an adjunct researcher in the Institute on Aging, and I teach courses in urban studies and planning and gerontology. I think the other things that are important to note, I do work with the City of Portland on their HNA HPS work. Ariel Kane, tip of the hat to you and your team. And I also have a dotted line, I'd say at this moment, connected to Northwest Pilot Project as a board member and doing a little bit of advocacy with them. And I am currently doing some consulting work with AARP and have done over the last couple of years with age-friendly cities, both in the state and in the United States. So to bring that lens as an age-friendly city kind of program expert here to help address housing and environments for older adults and people with disabilities.
Great. We're really glad to have you here. Thank you. How about Ariel? And then after Ariel will be Brianne. Oh, we can't hear you for some reason. No. No. I'm going to move us on to Brianne. Ariel, I'll come back to you.
Hi, I'm Brianne Gale. I'm a senior long-range planner with the City of Bend. I've worked on our past draft housing capacity analysis, and I'll be the lead on our upcoming housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy. I'm not involved with any of the other rulemaking.
Okay, thank you so much. And sorry, I lost track. Brock, please.
Hey everybody, I'm Brock Nation. I'm the policy director at Oregon Realtors, he, him pronouns. I've been involved with largely this process since the beginning of the House Bill 2003 work groups a couple of years ago, through legislation and everything in between. But glad to be here and good to meet you all for those that I don't know already.
Thank you. Jessica, and then Julia will come after that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Blakely, with Director of Development for the Salem Housing Authority, and I'm also a member of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee.
Great. And Julia?
Hey, everyone. Julia Metz. I use she, her pronouns, and I am housed in Sightline, but working in partnership with both Sightline and 1000 Friends with the ONA process, and also coming to this space with just under about a decade of affordable housing development experience as well. Oh, and I'm also on the Rulemaking Advisory Committee.
Great. Good to see you, Julia. Thank you. Kathleen, please.
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Wild. I was legal director of Disability Rights Oregon for almost 20 years. I'm here as a board member of Housing Land Advocates. I have a lot of expertise in fair housing. I was a technical advisory member of the last group, and I am here as well as on the Rulemaking Advisory Committee.
Great. Glad to have you here. Thank you so much. How about Kim, and then Mary Kyle will be after that.
Good morning, Kim McCarty, she, her pronouns, Executive Director, Community Alliance of Tenants. I'm really happy to be a part of this group. I come to this with my work at the City of Portland in fair housing and management of their tenant advocacy contracts. And currently I'm working for the Community Alliance of Tenants, and we're very concerned about more affordable housing in Oregon.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. Mary Kyle, please.
Hi, I'm Mary Kyle McCurdy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with 1000 Friends of Oregon. I am on the TAC, the last TAC, also whatever the name of that is, the one whose rules are due in January 26th. And I'm also on the RAC, and I was involved in the development of the legislation that led to this ONA process, as well as being involved with the middle housing legislation, the RAC and tax for that, which I think really forms a great basis for how to inform us on what's working, what's not working, both in terms of rulemaking and guidelines and investments and such. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kyle. We're glad to have you here. Michael.
Good morning. I'm Mike Boquist, City of LeGrand, far reaches of Eastern Oregon, and I'm hopefully here to represent, the rural planners of Oregon. And I participated in the middle housing RAC group and found it very beneficial. And hopefully we'll get some mileage done with this group and have some good decisions or recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, grateful to have your perspective here, Michael. Thank you so much. Nathan, and then Rachel will be after that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Teske. I'm the Executive Director of Bienestar. We're a community-based affordable housing developer that operates primarily in Washington County, to the west of Portland, Hillsborough, Forest Grove, Cornelius, those areas. I don't believe I've been involved in any formal rulemaking process before, but I've been doing development for several years. Hopefully I have a little wisdom to help out. Thanks.
For sure you do, and welcome to rulemaking. Sorry, I lost track of who was right after Nathan. Do you all know?
It's me, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Mori Bidu. I use she, her pronouns. I am here representing Network for Oregon Affordable Housing. We are a not-for-profit affordable housing lender. I am also the vice chair of the Washington County Planning Commission, but I am not representing the Planning Commission in any way in this process, but wanted to let all of you know. I also participating in the RAC, and hopefully I can, while I'm not a banker, bring some perspective from the finance community and kind of how everyone operates and sees housing through those eyes, and bring some, I mean, sorry to say it, but some more realistic and, you know, well, some reality to the situation if we need to. I don't want to be the downer in the group, but, you know, I will be kind of speaking for what the finance industry is looking for.
That's really helpful, Rachel. I think your experience will go far in this conversation for sure. So thank you for being here. I have 4 folks left. I'll just tell you the order. Shannon, then Samantha, I know you're on the phone, then Ted and Ariel will circle back to you. So
Good
Shannon.
morning. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Shannon Billhauer.
Uh-oh. You've frozen up on us, Shannon. All right. So Samantha, if you're there, please go ahead and we'll circle back with Shannon in a second.
Hi, all. Samantha Bear. I use she, her pronouns. I apologize. I am on the phone because I am driving up north today. I am of counsel for the Oregon Home Builders Association, so representing the residential construction industry in the state, and I'm also general counsel for the Oregon Property Owners Association. So I am a land use lawyer and a lobbyist. I was on the small group of folks who helped in the passage of 2001, was on the previous 2001 work group. I think I'm on this RAC as well as all of the tax. And again, I apologize for not being able to be on Zoom today.
We're glad to have you by phone, Samantha. Thank you. Ted.
Morning, I'm Ted Reed. I use he, him pronouns. I'm principal regional planner with Metro in the Portland region. I'm the project manager for our region's urban growth management decisions, including the decision that our council will make this calendar year. I'm also on the RAC for this and have participated in previous rulemaking around House Bill 2001 and 2003 from, I think, the 2019 session. Good to see you all.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Ted. Thank you. I'm going to go to Ariel, and then Shannon will circle back to you.
All right. Good morning. Hopefully this is working. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Ariel Kane. I'm an economic planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in the city of Portland. I'm one of the lead planners for Portland's housing needs analysis and housing production strategy. I had the pleasure of working on a number of other housing needs analysis and housing production strategies in my previous job with Echo Northwest. I'm not currently serving on any of the other TACs or the RAC, but my teammates are, so I'm looking forward to having sort of a cohesive understanding of all the different things that are going on.
Great. Thank you so much. And Shannon.
Okay, trying one more time. Shannon Billhauer, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. I did serve on the RAC and Housing Production TAC for middle housing. I'm also on the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. I've worked for Habitat for Humanity in the state in one capacity or another for 24 and a half years. I also work with our national policy leaders for Habitat for Humanity on affordable home ownership based in DC. I think that a focus and a lens that I want to just explicitly say I bring to this work are looking at the racial wealth gap in our nation and how that ties to who has had and who has been denied affordable home ownership opportunities, or even had that asset forcibly seized by government entities. And I just want to bring that up. Probably from time to time, you'll hear that from me. Thank you.
Really appreciate that, Shannon. And it's a perfect segue into our next agenda item. I am quite positive I didn't miss anyone. Okay. Yes, I think I'm right. And I do know we have a couple of TAC member or a few TAC members that aren't here today, weren't able to attend. When they attend the next meeting, we'll give them a moment to introduce themselves. I'm really excited about this collection of perspectives and experiences. I think this is going to be a really rich conversation about how to help DLCD draft some rules and guidance materials. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to DLCD staff to talk about touch on the racial equity framework, which we've talked about before, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Mari.
Thanks, Deb. Let me share my screen real quick. Please let me know if you can see the racial equity framework for decision making. I see thumbs up. Thank you. So I'll quickly touch on this. I get the honor of touching on this, and I'm excited about that. So you all might recall from the TAC orientation at the end of last year, but then also this document was linked within the agenda item for this agenda. This document, this racial equity framework document, was developed and adopted by our commission, so the Land Conservation and Development Commission, last summer. This tool, I'm going to quickly talk about it, overview it, but then kind of get into how this shows up for us in our TAC. This tool, as you can see, and hopefully you've been able to kind of engage with this document, has 8 different categories. And within each category, there are multiple questions embedded in those categories. This tool really is designed to deliberately focus and center racial equity in decision-making processes. You can think of this tool as both a dynamic process, but also a tangible outcome. And really what I'm talking about is a racial equity lens that will help us kind of reveal how current present day issues as it relates to housing kind of trace back to historic inequities, policies, practices, power dynamics, etc. So really the goal of this tool is to help us kind of prompt intentional change in our work, in our project, in our rulemaking, and kind of think about and anticipate potential negative outcomes and try to kind of address that in the scope of our work. I want to touch on an important piece. This tool, this document, is called the Racial Equity Framework for Decision Making, and I want to emphasize racial equity. And the reason why is because this tool is designed to center race. However, we are applying an intersectional lens to this tool. So communities of color are at the heart of this tool, of this framework. However, we acknowledge that there are multiple intersections within, communities of color that span to other historically marginalized groups and identities. And so, collectively, this comprehensive centering of race with an intersectional approach should help us kind of understand kind of the broader context. The commission does expect the department to use this tool and both on programmatic and non-programmatic work. So this tool is showing up in this rulemaking process, which is why we're sharing this with you. Now, in terms of how it shows up in our work at the needs and production, the NAPTAC level, you know, staff and myself have been thinking about how best to have this tool show up and operationalize it. And in those discussions, it became very clear that the responsibility of centering race or racial equity and engaging in this important thought exercise as part of the rulemaking process should be shared with everyone involved. You know, the intent behind the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Policy is to kind of shift how state and local governments think about and make policy decisions on the ground as it relates to needed housing. And really at the heart of the policy is to empower local governments in developing policies that support diversity of housing types, characteristics, and locations. So it's very much kind of at the center of our work. And, you know, and behind that intent is also this work towards, you know, achieving fair and equitable housing outcomes. So our ask of you all is to share this racial equity framework responsibility in this thought exercise in this work. Someone. Okay, I'll continue. I thought I heard something, you know, and you know, help us kind of have this at the forefront. So to aid you in kind of ensuring that you all keep this top of mind and at the very forefront anytime you engage in these meetings and in discussion. We will be crosswalking the various categories on the tool with meeting topic areas and spotlighting those or highlighting those on the agenda. Staff won't be asking you to respond to all the questions. That is a responsibility that we are taking ourselves on the back end. However, we all do encourage you to offer that feedback. I heard a lot of you, you know, kind of talk about the importance of, you know, I heard racial wealth gap that has intersections with racial equity, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we'll be hearing all of that, obviously, but also feel the door is open if you want to give us direct feedback on any of the questions. And we'll be building in kind of targeted timelines throughout the NAPTAC process to kind of bring forward the work on the back end that staff are doing as it relates to this tool. And of course, to hear your feedback on this work. So with that in mind, on your agenda, we spotlighted two categories of the tool. We spotlighted historical inequities and benefits and burdens. Both of these categories prompt us to consider kind of what existing disparities exist for communities of color and, you know, think about and evaluate, assess the impacts and trade-offs. So with that in mind, I call on you all to kind of think about that as we move into our next segment of the agenda and really keep that at the forefront as we engage on the work of needed housing as it relates to types, characteristics, and location. With that, Deb, I think I'll hand this back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mari. And we will, with every meeting forthcoming, we'll highlight for you probably similar questions to these, but those questions that are relevant, just to make sure we're keeping those in mind, and the links to the framework are there for your reference in the future as well. So shifting into discussion mode, we have maybe about 45 minutes for discussion. We are hoping to have this initial brainstorming around what these elements of needed housing in the statute could mean, what you think they might mean, and I'll direct you specifically to the defining needed housing in the ONA policy brief that's attached there in the materials. Hopefully you all have had a chance to at least scan through it so you have some grounding about why we're having this conversation and the meaningfulness of the definition of needed housing. And we're going to discuss sort of what the rule needs to do to clarify things if that's necessary. So reflecting, actually, sorry, before we get right into discussion, let me just recap some ground rules that were in the TAC charge. I think you all know these well from many meetings. But we're asking you, of course, to stay on topic, speak one at a time. I don't think these will be problems. Allow for a balance of speaking time and respect, the time limitations we have together. Bring concerns and ideas up for discussion at the earliest point in the process, now. Address issues and questions, not people or organizations. Avoid personal attacks. Listen with respect and avoid side conversations. Easier in the virtual environment than in the room. And then, of course, we are also hoping and suggesting it'd be great if everyone seeks to learn and understand one another's perspectives. Encourage we also encourage respectful, candid, and constructive discussions. And we're seeking to resolve differences and find common ground. Again, not our primary aim, but the more we can find that common ground, the better, or the easier it will be to write the rules. And then, as appropriate, discuss topics together rather than isolation. So bring those thoughts to these meetings as we go forward, and make every effort to avoid surprises. And those are ground rules for ourselves, the team, as well as TAC members. So with that in mind, keeping in mind the racial equity framework questions and framing that Madi just went over, and thinking about the sort of framing and the policy brief around needed housing, we have three primary elements to talk about, and I'll just start at the top, but it's housing type, housing characteristics, and housing locations, and these questions are in your agenda. Are there housing types missing from the needed housing that's listed in statute, that are also not prevalent on the ground but should be planned for by cities? So I'm going to open it up. Yep. Please go ahead, Brock.
Just off the top of my head, the one that I remember was potentially missing was ADUs. So I think those could be important, certainly, as they can help provide lower rent options for housing. So I think that's one that we should consider in the process.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, Shannon, I'm going to call on you in just a second. Celestina, if you want to share screen with your note taking, that'll be great. Go ahead, Shannon.
Thanks. I may just speak with my video off just since internet seems shaky.
That's fine.
Thanks. I was thinking explicitly family-sized homes, and also I wanted to call out intergenerational living, which could include ADUs, and also just name entry-level home ownership opportunities. Thanks.
Yeah, can I just get a little clarification? When you say family-sized homes, what sort of things are you imagining?
Often with, I've noticed, often with larger developments of lower income rental, those are often, say, 1 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And especially when we look at, I think, communities Habitat serves, who also earn on average around 40% AMI, we are particularly good at serving larger households, and often diverse and intergenerational households, and those needs aren't necessarily being met routinely with newly developed low-income housing stock.
Great, thank you for the clarification, Shannon. I appreciate that. Alan, please.
Yeah, just to build on Shannon's point, I would say that from the family-sized homes, a kind of 3-bedroom unit is really helpful, not just from the intergenerational perspective, but for people connecting socially. And I think that there's an element of loneliness and isolation that's important to remember. We're witnessing an epidemic of loneliness and isolation across our country. So this is a health-related kind of issue to deal with. And I'd say the only other thing that's missing from the housing types may be tiny homes on wheels. Portland's done some good work in allowing, as part of its shelter to housing continuum, if you have the right kind of hookups for a tiny home on wheels to replace that ADU or another kind of middle housing type. So to being open to that as an opportunity, and I'd say this from the aging disability perspective, is that there are actually models that exist in the United States right now of accessible tiny homes on wheels. So there's a real opportunity for people to use their secondary home, you know, sit in the backyard and really repurpose their front property, single family home, in a more traditional kind of home. So don't want us to lose track of the fact that tiny homes on wheels are a thing that are evolving.
Thanks, Alan. That's helpful. Rachel.
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight that the vast majority, if not all, of affordable housing that's constructed through government-based awards are multifamily apartments, and keeping in mind different values of our community members. That doesn't work for everyone. And I think that in addition to that, needing different types of low income and affordable housing, we also need to take a look at, and this is like a much bigger picture housing type, but how we can use the housing types that are available to help build equity for future generations.
So different ownership models.
Yeah.
Got it. And just a reminder, I think you all know this, but this needed housing definition is not just for lower income or affordable subsidized housing, but this applies to all types of housing that are needed throughout Oregon. But we know a lot of that need is in lower incomes. Jessica, please.
Hello. So when I was looking at this, I was trying to see what is already defined in statute, but what I didn't see was supported housing. So like housing with supportive services is very different model and very different. It's just different than independent living and housing without supportive services. So we call it supported housing or permanent supportive housing. And I think someone else mentioned in their transitional housing. So that's kind of what we, the tiny homes on wheels and some of the other types of housing, we would consider those, or we would call those transitional, but there's so many different models of transitional housing. So those are the ones that I had noticed right away.
And permanent supported housing might be a blend. It sounds like it might be a blend between types of housing as well as characteristics of housing, which we can get to. But
correct. Yeah. So it's supported housing. There's lots of different ways to call it. There's housing with supportive services. There's permanent supportive housing. There's so many different types of ways to describe it, but essentially it's not necessarily that independent living, but it's supported in some fashion with services.
Yeah. Thank you. Mary Kyle, please.
Thanks. You started to touch on this earlier, but to ensure that we're not limited to just the rental and home ownership types of ownership, but also co-ops, community ownership, land trusts, that sort of thing. And then I had a question for Jessica to see if what she just described as permanent supportive housing includes things like permanent group home living for, say, adults with developmental disabilities and that sort of thing, subsidized or not.
I did write down group homes as well. Yes. I don't know where that would fall in though.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if I'm using the correct term for where people I know live. So, but that's what I was trying to get at. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kyle, and we can get into that some more too as we go along. Brock, please.
Should have brought this up the first time. It is kind of included, but I just wanted to call it out explicitly. This is in section 23 of chapter 13. under the needed housing definition. It does have multifamily housing that's owned or rented, but I wanted to specifically call out condos.
Great, thank you. That might be one of those too, that it's hard to know where the type leads off and characteristics picks up. Nathan, please.
Yeah, this is under the area of ownership, kind of building off what Mary Kyle was saying about cooperatives. You know, one of the models that has been used in rural areas is cooperative home ownership, or excuse me, cooperative ownership of manufactured home parks. And Unastar has had a couple of conversations with jurisdictions kind of in the area we work about doing something like that, but creating an actual ownership of land that would require very small lot sizes for the homes, but in some sort of cooperative homeowners association type arrangement, but where you still would own a small piece of land and you could build a little equity that way, and you'd have a manufactured park. So I think that would require some changes around lot sizes, for example, and what's a small enough piece of land to own. So we're interested in that.
Great, thank you. Michael, please.
Yeah, so I just want to just throw a thought out for maybe a future discussion, but as we look at affordability and we look at housing choices, we have a number of homes in our community that are shared units with, whether it's packed full of college kids or whether it's workforce housing. But one of the, I guess, effects that we're noticing with that type of living arrangement is that it influences the rental rates in our community, and it helps to support the concept of at least the rental owner charging a higher rate. And and three folks or more living in the same dwelling unit can afford that higher rent. And it makes it really challenging on the affordable housing side for a family that needs that entire house because they now can't afford that rent. And but anyway, it's just a thought I want to throw out there. I don't have a solution, but it is a problem in our community that is causing affordability challenges.
Yeah, good one. Thank you, Michael. Brock, I'm going to hang on one second. I'm going to go to Matt. Hi, Matt. Welcome. And actually, before you give us your housing type, would you mind just introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, sorry I had to join a little bit late, but my name is Matt Sears. I'm the legal director over here at the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. I use he, his, him pronouns, and I've been with Fair Housing Council of Oregon for about a year. So the thing that I wanted to mention was, looking at the definition of needed housing under the legislation, when it talks about housing for individuals with a variety of disabilities, and this kind of crosses over between characteristics and types, but it talks about housing for individuals with a variety of disabilities. That's great. But then it starts to specify related to mobility or communications that require accessibility features. So I think that the definition of needed housing for persons with disabilities is a little bit skewed towards the idea of physical accessibility and overlooks considerations about housing for people with mental disabilities. And I think that also gets back to the comment made earlier about permanent supportive housing. Like, what does supportive housing look like? And that means wraparound services for people with mental health issues as well. So I think it's been addressed a little bit, but I wanted to flag that I think that's one type that, it has housing for people with disabilities flagged as a needed housing type, which is great. But I think the thinking has been a little bit too restricted to physical accessibility when mental health issues and accessibility for people with mental illness should be considered too.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that. Brock and Shannon, then I am going to move us on to the other elements which we've been blending into. So go ahead, Brock.
Yeah, just quickly, Sam, let me know that she's going to send some thoughts via email to the group. She's not able to come off mute right now. The other thing I was going to say, I'm actually going to do the same. I have a couple of resources that I want to share. One of them, I think, relates to Nathan's comments about the size of the lot. It's just a Google Maps screenshot of the Villa Bly area in Wilsonville, and just kind of shows, different lot sizes and different home sizes, all single family detached, but, anywhere from a single family home on a 5-acre lot that's like just outside the neighborhood to, a single family home on a relatively standard size lot, maybe a little bit smaller and even smaller than that, as well as results from a January 2024 housing poll of Oregonians, and the link to that, as well as a literature review on housing supply and affordability.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, please.
Thanks. Just speaking to the language around disability housing needed, I just wanted to call it again that it mentions individuals, and some of those individuals are part of larger households. So for example, the homes that we're building are visitable, and wherever we can, they have at least one bedroom on the main floor. And we also do many single-story homes that have larger households with a member who has who's differently abled and needs that support. So just wanted to call that out. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, a different type of supported housing that we need to be mindful of. Mr. Lazo, the other Alan.
Thanks, Deb. Appreciate the distinction. I kept looking up when you said Alan before too, so it's not often.
No, I'm sorry.
No, really, it worked out great. I was actually, this might be a good transition to the next piece. I'm curious about where we might be headed as far as looking at actual revisions to putting into rules revisions to the statute. The ORS right now makes reference to needed housing by housing type. Will we be adding sections then for characteristic and location in the rules? Or I guess in the regulation itself, like will we actually add subsections that says needed housing includes the following housing characteristics and includes the following housing location considerations?
I'll let Mari address that. Thank you, Mari.
Alan, I think you're hitting on an important question up for consideration for the TAC, really. Our charge is to help local governments make that translation of needed housing into these characteristics, types, and location, and how that shows up in rule is something for this TAC to kind of work through, and today is kind of that first step. So I'm as we continue, I think that those are some of the things that we'll want to grapple with. Thanks for raising it.
Yeah. Rachel, please go ahead. And if you have something about type specifically, great. And if not, moving on to characteristics and locations, great.
Yeah, sorry, I have one more thing about type. One thing that I have noticed in the single detached dwelling space is, and this goes along with intergenerational and ADA considerations, is that there are not a lot of options for intergenerational single detached dwellings, where maybe parents will be on, aging in place on a ground floor, and a younger family is living on the other floors. A lot of the options only include stairs going down to a level that would make sense for aging in maybe a individual or a couple aging in place. So I find that there's a big hole there in the single detached dwelling space.
Thank you. That's really good perspective. Go ahead, Mary Kyle.
Thanks. I wanted to maybe respond to Mr. Lazo's, at Ellen's question, because Goal 10 independently has, and always has since it was written, required consideration of housing location as well as type and density. So aside from whatever might be in the statute, the Goal 10 has always required that. So I'm glad we're going to be talking about that. We have to talk about that for a lot of reasons, but it's been there for almost 50 years.
Yeah. Thank you. Matt.
Yeah, I was also just going to respond to Alan's comment. And I think it is within the statute that was passed too, because it talks about needed housing means affordability level. It also cites type, characteristics, and location. So I think it's just the nice thing about that is it does empower the agency to run with that, I think. And I think it's within your authority as an agency to start drilling down into that. We don't need to wait for a statute to really define these things. It's part of the charge is for us to help determine what those characteristics and locations look like and how they're defined in regulation. I think that would be something we should task ourselves with.
Wonderful. Thank you. Julia, please.
Thanks. This, I think, probably straddles types and characteristics a little bit, like many of the topics, but specifically related to single room occupancy. I think it's important to just ensure that there's kind of flexibility in definitions or acknowledgement, I guess, of nuance of definitions with all the types we're talking about, but especially with things like SROs, where I think, there's kind of the old school, traditional perspective of SROs where it's literally a room with a bed and then shared bathroom, shared kitchen, shared everything. From more of a trauma-informed design consideration, there's, at least in a lot of the developments I worked on, there was a shift to more of kind of a hybrid model of having a private bathroom and maybe even a kitchenette, as to not like force, people to socialize if they're not emotionally in that place, but still kind of leaning into the efficiencies of the SROs in terms of, larger common spaces, while still having those like daily necessities existing within the units themselves. This is something that I know I've talked to some, folks from the disability rights communities and things like that have also kind of supported that more kind of hybrid setup, just for some allowance for independence, while again, creating space for community and efficiencies and building designs. So
thank you. And you're really pointing, all of you have really been pointing out this tension of the more we try to define, the more we realize there are all these other types that we haven't defined. And that's what we're going to be sorting through here. But I appreciate this has been a really rich conversation so far to raise these other types that aren't explicit in the statute. Brock.
Oh, it looks like Kathleen has her hand up too. I was going to move into characteristics. So Kathleen, if you're just type, I'll let you know.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Brock.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's characteristics or types, but when you talk about group homes for people who have either mental disorders, who have been released by the PSRB, who are needing supports, you need to have multiple bedrooms. You may have 8 to 10 to 15 or more people, and you don't want dorms in those situations. So you need to think about a larger building with enough bedrooms as well as common space, so that they can have the staff and support as well as the private space.
Thank you. And would you mind telling us what PSRB is?
Oh, Psychiatric Security Review Board. People who have been found innocent except for insanity, and they are under the jurisdiction of the Psychiatric Security Review Board. And once they are released, there have to be some conditions met for their release, and that is why these group homes exist. It is also true for people who are found unable to stand trial. They need similar supports, and that's one of the things that is keeping people in the state hospitals as well as in the jails not having enough of this housing. And there was just recently a big battle in the legislature over the siting of these facilities.
Thank you for educating us, Kathleen. Really appreciate that. Brock.
So moving on to characteristics, and this is kind of a comment, kind of a question for staff, but characteristic wise, it seems like a lot of this is stuff that is potentially more related to BCD than it is to land use planning. And so I just wanted to flag that and just say, I don't know how much within the rules we'll be able to specify characteristics, since that is a building code piece. Two, I would just say, well, I think it's certainly important to consider characteristics, and obviously we have a legislative directive to do that. But I think as much as we can keep that kind of high level with as much detail as we need is going to be better.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think, at this point anyway, if you don't know whether it's building code or land use, don't worry about it. We can sort through that and we'll come back to you and talk about those distinctions. But if you do, yeah, great. It's good to highlight that. Thank you, Brock.
Yeah.
Go ahead. One of you. Sorry, Mari or Celestina.
Go ahead, Celestina. I'll yield back.
Sure. Well, you tack on as needed. I was just going to add that certainly, we are not going to be determining what the building codes regulations are. What we will be discussing is how to plan for various types of housing with various characteristics. So the exact specifications of where the grab bars go in an accessible home is not something we'll be discussing, but the fact that as a state, we need to be planning for homes with characteristics that meet the needs of our communities is definitely within the domain. Mari, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. And I also wanted to emphasize Deb's point that it's great that, the expertise in the room lends itself to know that there are some areas that fall within building codes division. But I think that's okay, and we'll sort that out. I think this is part of the process to kind of understand what the domain within the land use context characteristics falls under. And so on the back end, of course, DLCD will be doing that, but I don't want to discourage folks to not raise their feedback around what they feel characteristics might be, and that sorting will continue to do. And of course, this is the group of this is the charge of the collective group of working together and saying, hey, you know what, this might feel like it falls here, and then building off of that. So maybe early in this process, let's be open, and then of course we'll sort through those domains concurrently. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alan Lazo.
Thanks, Deb. Yeah, I'm wondering if, this could be, as we said, a pretty broad ranging area, but I'm wondering if there are a couple of filters we could use, I think, when we think about characteristics and its intersection, particularly to fair and equitable housing outcomes. One, obviously, and I think there's a lot of intent around this in the legislation, is around accessibility, visitability, and those pieces. Again, I think that's a big intersection. The other might be around affordability and how those intersect. And the example I would give actually is what has happened previously around minimum parking requirements and pieces like that. So are there characteristics that impact affordability and then further then impact which communities might get served? So again, that might be the kind of filter we use here, since the characteristics is a pretty wide open bucket. So I'm wondering if that's one of the ways we might look at that filter.
I think that's helpful insight. I mean, I think this is one of those areas, this characteristic is such a wide open term. But I like the idea of maybe starting to think about what that relationship is to land use, especially, and how that plays out. And some of the sort of structure sizes that we've been talking around with type, I think comes into that characteristic as well. Shannon, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm just going there straight to characteristics.
Please.
And maybe some are obvious, but I think energy efficient. We're in this moment of unprecedented IRA resources that helps contribute to long-term affordability to operate a home that's built. I'm just going to explicitly try to use this subjective word of inviting. Like that these homes are attractive, that you're proud to come home to that space. Maybe has to do with low income, but I think mixed income might be optimal for some social reasons. I'll stop there.
That's great, Shannon. Thank you for opening the door. Julia.
So I have a couple of kind of specific, potentially building code leaning thoughts, and then also can zoom back up to the land use perspective too. But kind of layering in on the energy efficient component, I also think that there's some thought that needs to be given to kind of environmental impacts. So things like air quality, ventilation systems, acknowledging, wildfire risk, which can both be a building placement, lot placement, but also building design. How do you make sure you can have healthy, fresh air inside your home if there's toxic smoke outside, those types of things. I also would encourage us to contemplate the OHCS Core Development Manual, or the CDM, which is kind of the guidelines that are given to all developers who are getting money from OHCS. That includes some specific design requirements, building elements, things like that. It might be a little bit too in the weeds for this, but I always want to make sure we're thinking through the way that all these requirements are going to be braided. And especially when we're talking about affordable housing, the fact that OHCS already has like a book this thick touching on a lot of these topics, making sure that we're coordinating with, not conflicting with those requirements. And then kind of zooming out to the land use side of things, I've seen some good strategies in a couple of HPSs or existing building or land use code to kind of encourage some of the things we're talking about by way of land use. So things like density bonuses, if you go above and beyond in terms of the number of visitable units you provide, acknowledging that, you know, accessible and visitable units require a little bit more space. And so maybe the land use code allows for a little bit more building because of that, those types of things to kind of mitigate some of the tensions that can exist with some of the characteristics we might be wanting to value here.
Great, thank you. I saw at least one thumbs up on that. Kim, hi, please.
I wanted to add a few things. Under types, I don't see cluster housing. And under characteristics, I wanted to add multi-generational housing, which I think is more inclusive than just family housing. And then to expand on the energy use and conservation, so also water conservation, thoughtfulness, in terms of site design and in terms of water runoff as well. And I think characteristics that just also keep in mind affordability. So like when we're talking about metering, utilities, all of those things are really garbage disposal. All those things are very important to tenants.
Yeah, thank you so much, and really appreciate you bringing the idea of site design in as well. It's not just the structure itself that has a characteristic. Alan Delatorre.
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of quick things too. Like I love the idea of site design and thinking about services. And I actually, before I get started, Celestine, I sent you over a quick kind of thing to copy and paste because I was trying to organize my thoughts. That might be easy to cut and paste into the notes. But a few things that were important to note: adaptability. So as we see household changes, making sure that we're allowing for people to age in their homes without needing to do really expensive upgrades, renovations, backings and walls, thinking about residential elevator placement that could come on the outside of a building or in a stacked kind of closet setting, something along those lines. Socially connected, as I mentioned in the last piece, but that is visitable. This idea of visitability is allowing people to come into your home who are not living in that home. And so I think specifically thinking about social connectivity in our middle housing design, service compatibility. So disability, and this builds on Matt's comments, but disability includes self-care and the ability to go out of one's home, not just physical disabilities and cognitive disabilities, but that caregiving component. And then are we ready to receive home and community-based services, whether these are permanent supportive housing services or kind of more traditional aging people with disability and veteran services. So kind of a variety of services that are out there. And then I really want to hone in on a couple of high priority aspects of the physical environment. So zero-step entrances, accessible bathrooms, and I think Julia's point is really important. We're asking folks to add square footage to the bathroom. Are we asking them to take that square footage away from other places, or do we give them a little bit more because they're building out this accessible, visitable component? And then I think the last piece is kind of understanding how the Medicaid eligibility in congregate housing settings factors into this. So adult foster homes are a great example of lower income housing in community settings for people with disabilities that are often in a place to receive Medicaid funding. So that's a great opportunity. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge, I see 4 hands up. We have 10-ish minutes for conversation. I want to at least get going on the location. And I also want to acknowledge I haven't heard from a few of you, so I might check in with you before the end. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I want to make sure that we have fair space here. But with all that, let's keep moving. Go ahead, Brock.
Just quickly on characteristic, I know we touched on it elsewhere, but it kind of crosses between both, but ensuring that the types of housing that we produce support home ownership opportunities. And that's going to be really important as we consider how the rule addresses historical inequities for communities of color as well.
Great, thank you. Michael, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Alan Lazo kind of triggered a memory for me, or a thought for me, as in a conversation we're currently having in our community. But the parking requirements for middle housing has influenced how we look at walkability and bikeability of our community. And we're now looking at kind of pushing, parking and taking advantage of the on-street parking as satisfying that need for those that have vehicles. And it works great in a new subdivision, but it's really difficult when you're dealing with infill in existing neighborhoods. And so the conversation we're having right now is, how do we get bike lanes or sidewalks and pathways and other things as an infill project in our community, when eliminating on-street parking is the option that is available to us. And when you have a limitation with not requiring, being able to require a certain amount of off-street parking to offset that, it really creates challenges with how do you deal with the bikeability and walkability elements. And so as we have that conversation, I'd like to kind of have that discussion included in parking if we go that direction. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go to Brianne, but Kathleen, I see your hand up, so I'll come back to you. You don't have to keep holding it up. Thank you. Go ahead.
Just quickly, I would say, echoing what Alan and others had said about adaptability and thinking about specifically like single family homes, often not just being for single families, maybe at one point in their life cycle they are, but they may be for multi-generational or for other types of uses, multiple people sharing or having individual rooms. And then just wanted to touch on site design and the importance of site design characteristics, making sure that we're not trading off things like sidewalks so that they are affordable, or even minimal landscaping so that they become affordable, but then we're also giving up some other kind of important quality that everyone deserves to have. So
yeah, thinking about that balance. Thank you so much. Rachel, and then I'm going to go to Kathleen after Rachel.
Okay, I just have a couple quick points. First off, I think one characteristic that's really important from the finance perspective is that we can actually find institutions that will finance the housing, whether it be an ADU or up to, multifamily. And then, from an affordable housing perspective, I think we're really missing a lot of middle income, or what we would consider like higher limit affordable housing, like 80 to 120% AMI. And then from the institutional banking perspective, it's really important for the larger institutions when they're looking at financing a large development, that the restrictions are not, that they're foreclosable, so that the restrictions will be removed in a foreclosure situation.
That's a good insight to thinking about the legal structure and banking, how bankers think about these things as well. Kathleen, and then Julia.
I wanted to move to locations, following up on my past comment about group homes and group facilities for people with mental illness. It's a huge issue in terms of where they can get sited. They need to be in residential areas, and that's precisely where you get the pushback. So we need to include strategies for siting that may require legal either litigation or the threat of litigation, because the Fair Housing Act allows these places to be sited virtually anywhere, including in residential areas, which is where they're most supportive to the people who live there. But that's also where you get the most pushback. So it's the federal law that is supporting the location of these places because state law is not at this moment.
Thank you. Julia, either characteristics or location.
Yeah, I wanted to, excuse me, wanted to jump onto locations. So one of the things I'm hoping we'll have a lot more time to dig into is there's often kind of a reference to ensuring especially low income or affordable housing or housing for vulnerable populations is located in high opportunity areas, somewhat related to Kathleen's comments that she was just making. I want to make sure that there's actually a definition of what that means and like that there's some guidance, like clear guidance that is consistent, but consistent in terms of how that is defined, but also acknowledges kind of the push-pull that exists of like proximity in an urban setting versus a less urban setting and things like that. And also with that, you know, we're talking about being located near things as desirable, but also acknowledging the things that are undesirable or unhealthy, and making sure that we're not just putting all of our affordable housing or housing for vulnerable populations, you know, just solely on freeway corridors or in areas that are at higher risk of wildfires or other natural hazards.
Thank you so much for that perspective. And I know as we get into the affirmatively furthering fair housing discussions, we'll be touching on that opportunity area definition as well. So for sure, we'll be digging into all of these topics more. Yes. Go ahead, Brock.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to echo Julia's comment about the location, especially near transportation corridors with particulate matter emissions and things like that, that can really have a lot of substantial health impacts. The other thing that I want to touch on here, and it relates also to transportation, but just when we're, and I think this is, I'll keep this more abstract right now. But I think as we're considering transportation to the housing that we're building, one of the things that we're going to have to consider very closely is both the time and the cost that it's going to take to get public transit out there. Can be very expensive. For example, I live in Wilsonville 3 days a week. I work in Salem. The other 2 days I work from home, right? The WES line, light rail that they have been planning to extend from Wilsonville to Salem for a long time still doesn't have a single dollar allocated. And it's potentially going to be up to 2 decades until that project's complete unless there's state level intervention. So I think, you know, considering how the transportation piece plays in, great if we can get more people to take public transit, but cost and time are a very meaningful factor in those discussions.
Got it. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge we have 5 minutes left in this meeting. I'd like at least 1.5 minutes at the end just to do a little bit of a wrap up and a preview looking forward. Jessica, though, please go ahead.
Hi, just real quick. I really echo what everyone said, and the HUD definition for deconcentration of poverty is great when we're speaking of location of like those high, kind of where she said higher opportunity areas. And so that's kind of the verbiage that we use is the attempts to deconcentrate areas that would be generally noted as a more impoverished area. And then somewhere in there, maybe it would fit maybe where housing shouldn't go, maybe food deserts. So, or deserts in general, just like I wrote down the transportation hubs too being an important thing, which I think was just touched on.
Great, thank you. Mary Kyle.
Thank you. Building on what's been said, I think we have to measure accessibility not just as proximity, but as walkability and also bikeability for several reasons. First, we need affordable living, not just the house rent or mortgage, to reduce the need for driving, or maybe to have that first or second car can save a lot of household income. And secondly, the vast majority of trips people make every day are not to work, and even less so now with a lot of home commuting. Most of them are to school, stores, services, things that are and should be located in those neighborhoods, areas of opportunity that are many of which should and could be accessed by walking or biking. Most of our cities don't really have great transit, so I don't want us to get too hung up on that. Being transit friendly is great in terms of our neighborhood design, but we don't have great transit in most of our cities. So we have to focus on other ways of people to get around, particularly as we have an aging population where driving just isn't going to be the first choice. So we just need other ways of getting around. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep going here. I just want to acknowledge we are likely not to get through the rest of you before we have to conclude our meeting. We'll have a way to add some comments and we can wrap up here in just a second. But go ahead, Shannon. I think I'll get to Shannon and Brianne, and that might be it.
Thanks. I'll just be quick. So love to talk more in the future about inclusionary housing incentives, and also probably address how lackluster our inclusionary zoning state statute is at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. And Brianne.
And I was just going to say, just proximity and near existing and planned for like well-connected bike and ped networks and transit, but agree with me in that that doesn't always exist. And then, and I think the operative word there is planned for. So it's not just existing, but also planned for proximity, like CFEC rules come to mind. And then near existing and planned for walkable mixed use centers, and the key destinations also kind of come to mind from CFEC.
Great. Thank you so much. What a great initial brainstorming. This is obviously not the end, especially as the last couple of bits of conversation we just had will really feed into the next meeting, focused on the fair housing provisions and statute and the affirmatively furthering fair housing and how those connect here. So this is a great start for this group. A couple of things. As I mentioned, we will follow up with a way for you to provide additional written comment. We are also, I got word in the midst of the meeting here, Brock, at the beginning of the meeting, you asked how to share some information. I know we've heard some other people mention some other bits of resources since the beginning of the meeting. It's been clarified that we will have a way for TAC members to submit materials to DLCD. Those will be registered as public comment, and those can be shared among the full TAC that way. So especially, let's not, load it down with all sorts of stuff. Hopefully, I mean, at least for this TAC conversation, you can submit any public comment you want. I don't want to suggest that. But if you have materials that you think will help enrich our conversation and help educate one another as we enter these discussions or continue these discussions, please do share. So we'll follow up with how to do that, how to submit some additional comment on these topics that we didn't get to. And then also just know we'll have more coming to you. Our aim is to get you the next agenda packet. Hopefully tomorrow is truly our aim, but Friday at the latest. And well, that'll come with some materials and again, discussion questions. The next one, as I mentioned, will be around fair housing. The one after that will be really talking about these intersections of needed housing and fair housing. And then we'll continue that conversation through April as well. Let's see. Any other loose ends I need to cover or any questions anyone has that are pressing? We are 1 minute over and I apologize for that, but we'll do better next time. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for contributing, and we'll continue down this path and keep working together on this. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you